B1, Chapter 31, into Cheyenne. Hello, honey. I know you're still in there. They're telling me that the effects are irreversible, but you're improving by the day and I know you'll be talking again soon. I just want you to know that I still love you. Dr. Richard Sherman. Cheyenne Mountain, Colorado. 6 months after. This was the end. As Liam stared over the vast, barren space of western Colorado, he could feel it. The sun had just risen, casting long, wide beams onto the otherwise lifeless plains. After weeks of nothing but uninhabited mountains, it had been easy to forget the sheer weight of civilization that humanity had once had, but now that they'd marched over that final crest of the Rockies and were on the decline, the flats had been exposed, and with it, so came the truth. Nellie was dead. Lilith was dead. They had both been dead the whole time, well before Liam had ever braved the Pacific on his own. Leah had been right. There was no hope in ever seeing them again. His personal crusade had been a delusion. Worse yet, even now, even as he faced the sheer insurmountable wall of a dead world exposed, Liam still wanted to believe in their story. He wanted to think that Nellie and Lilith were still out there, hiding in some hole, doing their best to survive this ruined climate. Or perhaps what he wanted was to pass by some tombstone and see their names. Knowing where they had fallen and how it had happened would bring him some solace. Or perhaps he simply wanted to end it himself, so that he did not have to consider such futile questions. For the most inescapable truth of all was that for every question that Liam might ask, he'd never have an answer. Any trace of their journey had disappeared over a decade before he'd ever arrived, and it was impossible to find where they had gone or what they had done. Whatever happened to Nellie and Lilith wouldn't be found around the next bend, or any buildings they might pass. They were just gone. This here is God's country, his father had said. We're only visiting. In so many ways, that had finally come true. Of the billions of years that ever were, humanity was but a blip on the radar, and after the Hallowing reaped what they had sown, their vast cities had been reduced to dark, grey monuments slowly being digested by the natural kingdom besides. There would soon be no evidence that they'd ever been there to begin with. Unless Liam could surpass this final challenge. The past might have been gone, but there was still a chance to rekindle humanity's fire. So long as he could prove himself one last time, then perhaps there was hope yet. Liam no longer thought about his family, or what happened to him, or the fairness of it all. He only cared about the mission, and reaching its end. Liam yawned through the fatigue. They had been moving all night, and his head was starting to burn from the inside out. He had to have been pushing more than 24 hours awake, and had barely had a drop to drink that whole time. The hunting rifle felt comfortable in his arms, at least. It was an old Remington, and Leah had managed to snag it for him from one of the hunters she'd murdered on the way out. Other than her, he was the only one still armed. Maybe that would be enough. From what Leah had told him, Hades had recalled all the other hunter groups, and saved the contract only for Xander. Between their surviving followers and those that Leah had murdered, there could be no more than 30 hunters left. Only 30, he considered. Oh, who was he trying to fool? How much further? Liam asked. We're getting close, Mother said, her eyes fixed forth. He hopped over a rock. How much closer, precisely? Just keep moving. So that's it then? You're still playing the quiet game, even now. He would not forget the deception she'd fed him, nor would he ever fully trust her. Liam, Leah said with a bite. Her walk had been reduced to a limp, and one arm hung dead to the side, but the fire was back in her eyes, and she gripped her suppressed M1911, freshly cleaned and once again ready for use. That's enough. Mastermind gave them both a shrug. He'd barely been able to say a word after having his larynx obliterated, though he could squeeze in a whisper when needed. It doesn't matter, Mother said as they reached a bend. We're here. NORAD had been built deep into Cheyenne Mountain, with its entrance cutting straight into granite like a pipe jacked into the wall. A road ran between two hills, with over 100 yards of open space between the main gate and the mountain entrance. Barbed wire flanked the street, preventing any from entering. But it was what lay between that gave Liam pause. Hollows. More than he'd ever seen in one place, packed tightly together within the fenced street, all the way into the mountain itself. Jesus, he gasped. How do we get in there? Very carefully, Mother said before walking away. The others followed. When NORAD fell, Hades wanted to make sure that no one would ever be able to use it again. Cheyenne had become a hotspot for refugees because of this complex, so finding herds was easy. We found the largest we could and lured them into the tunnel, all the way to its second entrance more than a kilometer away. It was the ultimate defense, against humans as well as Reitsers. They reached a power relay station, with the fence half collapsed, and doors broken down. Mother walked inside and began to peel away floor tiles. You can't just sneak by them. Liam asked. No, she explained. Hollow-classed infected aren't as unintelligent as you think. Whether it's differences in pheromone production from Reitsers, the color of our eyes, or even the subtle changes in temperature when we've moved too fast and for too long, hollows are capable of remarkable discrimination. She tossed aside the last tile. That's why we have to be more clever than them. There was a pair of hazmat suits wrapped in plastic, with various vials and containers besides. Mother took them both out and started mixing chemicals together. These suits are built with a self-contained breathing apparatus to mask your breath, and with the artificial hollow scent applied, you'll be indistinguishable from them, so long as you move slowly. Don't worry, I've made this trip hundreds of times before. Liam eyed the suits curiously. This seems like an awful lot of effort to get in there. Why didn't you just release the hollows if you rebuilt this place in secret, or at least go somewhere else. She paused, her lilac eyes revealing nothing. There is a resource inside the space which is unique. I wouldn't be able to move it without risking its destruction, and there is no better place for containment than here. Had Hades not geolocate us, he would never have suspected that this was my hiding place. And what is this resource then that we need to get? She went back to her chemicals. Something that's made traveling well over 1,000 miles worthwhile. Liam scoffed, but Leah interposed herself between the two, her own visage more exhausted than his. Apparently, she had developed more tolerance for her vague bullshit than him. There's only 2 suits, Leah pointed out. Mother nodded. I wasn't expecting this to be so rushed. I figured that my people would help to keep watch while we made our move. But Mastermind can fit in place of my SCBA if he keeps still enough, and Liam will have a suit for himself. You telling me I'll have to wait out there? No. You'll just have to be more discreet than us. A single exhale in that tight of a space, and they'll detect your pheromones. She unzipped a suit. How long do you think you can hold your breath? Leah scanned the road filled with hollows, her brow furrowed and eyes fixed as she contemplated the severity of their crisis. 50 minutes. An hour maximum. Liam was aghast. 50 an hour max. It starts getting risky after that. Hollowing sets in quick. You can go even longer. She turned to him, confused. Hey. Liam laughed. Oh, love. When this whole mess is over, you and I are going to have a very long chat about the ridiculousness of what you just said. He shrugged. But for now, I suppose we'll just have to wing it, yet. They got into their hollow suits, and Liam immediately wished he could swap spots with Leah. The entire system was self-contained, with the old plastic wrapped tightly against his clothes, and metal shanks that dug straight into his flesh. The air tasted like it had been pulled from antiquity, and each breath cast another level of fog against the already dusty visor. Mother mixed more contents into a vial and stoppered the top. The liquid began to glow. You'll have to follow this once we get inside. I'll try to keep us away from as many hollows as I can. She slung it over her shoulder. What if I lose track? Liam asked. Then do everything in your power to keep from agitating them. A single bite and it's over. She clamped her boots in place. Does everyone know the plan? We can't risk waiting any longer. Liam and Leah nodded, and Mastermind gave them all a thumbs up before clambering onto Mother's back. Remember, Mother said. The moment we get in there, we have to be like them. No speaking. No sudden movements. No artificial sounds. We have to move slowly and carefully. And don't forget what's at stake. Yeah, your shame, Liam could have said, but Mother was right. Too much was at stake to get distracted with drama, and there was no denying that he needed any ally he could get. Mother zipped the last of her suit up. Good. Let's go. They descended into the valley, with Mother leading the charge, and Leah guarding Liam's flank. The hollows loitered throughout the street, with a mix of some wandering in circles while others simply sat in place, their faces in their laps. They didn't notice when the group slid through an open gap in the fence. Then the hollows were everywhere. Liam looked this way and that, and saw nothing but a sea of grey. Their skin was rotted and peeling, and their eyes were white and dead, and their hair ran in long, thin strands. The clothes had practically disintegrated after so much time, leaving only faded rags in place. The deeper into the horde they went, the more the hair rose on Liam's spine. It occurred to him that he'd never seen so many clustered in such a narrow space. His allies had always faced them while he stayed back. Here and now, however, there was nothing to stave off death, save for a thin layer of plastic draped over his otherwise vulnerable flesh. A hollow suddenly paused in front, dressed in the garbs of a soldier. It bent its head at the sight of Liam's visor. For a moment, Liam could swear that the two made eye contact as the hollow clattered its teeth. But then it moved on, leaving him only with his own fears. He let out a breath of relief and kept moving. Delicately, the group moved into the tunnel. Liam caught sight of the faded Cheyenne Mountain complex sign one last time before stepping into the veil of black. Between the fogginess of his visor and lack of light, it was difficult to see more than a few meters in front, but the activity died down, almost at once. He'd been told that the undead could survive in part by sunlight. When deprived of UV rays and stimulation for too long, they hibernated. Thus, the tunnel felt like a tomb, with bodies strewn about, and many overlapped to top others. The deeper the group went, the quieter they became, until there was only darkness. Liam could hear nothing but the sound of his own breath as he walked forward, one step at a time, 1 minute after another. His sole guide was Mother's glowstick, bobbing up and down the further she marched onward. Keep breathing. Just keep breathing. He occasionally checked behind for progress. The light of day became smaller and smaller, even as Mother's own lantern held strong. Until her glowstick suddenly whisked out. Liam blinked through the wall of darkness, but saw nothing. He waited, but still no light returned. Had he lost them? Fear began to grow as disorientation kicked in. The tunnel's entrance seemed miles away, and there was no other way to get his bearings. No matter where he looked, there was only more black. Liam tried to poke his toes out, only to step into something soft. A hollow moaned in response. Liam withdrew another step and nearly lost his balance entirely when he struck another hollow. Where the hell were they? He didn't share their bloody night vision. This place was a death trap. Then a hand grabbed Liam's arm and his heart skipped a beat. He froze, expecting the worst to come. But the hand softened before moving into a caress, all the way down his elbow and into his own palm. It wrapped its fingers around his. Leah. He breathed deep. The voyage continued, with the two moving as one. Liam was blind in this realm, but she navigated its winding paths like a Sherpa on Everest. No longer could Liam see the light of the surface. He was entirely at her mercy. And Liam could not have been more thankful. Though the coldness of her dead flesh was palpable, even through the layers of plastic and leather, nothing could have sent more warmth to his heart than her touch in this dark, lonely place. They caught sight of Mother's light again, and not a moment too soon. The air was starting to get thin in his suit, and Liam wasn't sure how much longer he could go before gasping. The ground quaked. It felt like no more than a tremor, as if a distant thunderstorm had been heralded. But then another earthquake followed the first, this one unquestionably louder. An artificial. Shit. The tunnel shuddered against another faraway explosion, and the hollows groaned in response. Liam could hear them all, rousing out of hibernation to his sides. Leah sensed the same trap and yanked him into a jog. Hisses grew in intensity as the native inhabitants of this environment detected them. But her movements were sound, and they dodged the hollows with ease. The entrance was right in front. Liam could see the visage of Mother through the crack of an exposed blast door. She waved them in. Another explosion went off, and more hollows moaned. Fingers began to claw at Liam, but his adrenaline was carrying him onward, and he shrugged them off before they could slow him down. He could see Leah's shadow now against the backdrop of the blast door. Hollows climbed to her side as she limped in front, as fast as her working leg could carry. With one final charge, she shoved their attackers aside. The pair broke through just in time. Mother yanked an adjacent lever, and the blast door pushed back in place, even as Hollows tried to limber through. The monolithic block was well over a foot thick of steel braced against hydraulic servos, and cared little for the insignificant creatures in its way. What few Hollows that managed to find purchase against the closing blast door were quickly crushed against its weight. Liam ripped off his helmet and breathed in fresher air, but that was all he could afford himself. The rest of the group had already started a run deeper into the complex, and he could not wait behind. There was no time left. Hades was coming for them. B1, Chapter 32, Matriarch. Why are you doing this? Because we don't know where this'll go. If the father lost his memories upon resurrection, then the same could apply to me. That's why I have to try to record my thoughts. I can't risk letting my knowledge die with my death. Dr. Ava Sherman. Cheyenne Mountain, Colorado. 5 months after. How had Mother let it come to this? Another explosion rocked the ground, this one closer than the last. He must be using the ventilation system, she considered. There was a network of filters and grates intended to prevent this very type of exploit, but with enough plastic explosives and manpower at his disposal, anything was possible. Hades could use brute force to circumvent her defenses entirely. Mother studied NORAD's command center anew. None but a few of the LCD monitors were still functional, and with the reduced lighting to save on power, it hardly encapsulated the splendor it once had. Cobwebs had collected in the corners after years of neglect, and the dust coated all but a few terminals. At least with her computer monitor running diagnostics, there were some sparks of life, even here. She began to wonder if this sense of despair was what the scientists and soldiers had felt when her and Hades had been set free. When Mother had manipulated Ava's husband into freeing them, and Hades had used the opportunity to start infecting anyone he could, did the last of America's government and Ian Dynamics aristocracy gaze upon their creation and feel so pitifully small in comparison? We're sitting ducks, Leah said. You need to get this over with now, Mother. Whatever needs to happen, whatever you need to collect, take care of it right this second. We can't stay. Mother could almost laugh. If only it were that simple. None of this had gone according to plan. Not the time it had taken for them to reach here, nor the death of her people and her capture along the way, nor the fact that an entire army of hunters was currently bypassing what she'd hoped would work as the ultimate defense. Her strategy had depended entirely on making Liam disappear before Hades could ever learn where he'd gone, and not facing him directly. But he had outflanked her, every step of the way. And now they were all watching her, as though she still knew what to do. Mother sighed. This situation just became a lot more complicated. The area we need to access is hidden next to the Missile Warning Center, which is the westernmost building in the facility. No one can bypass its security, other than me. Because of Hades's intervention, however, the base's secondary defenses have been triggered, which has forced the area into lockdown. Are you kidding me? Liam buried his face in his palm. A bunker within a bunker? How the bloody hell did you manage that one? She paused, considering her words carefully. I had help. The ground trembled again. Dust fell from the ceiling and the lights flickered. Leah took a step forth. Let me put this another way, Mother. As soon as Mastermind finds a weapon and gets back here, we're bugging the fuck out, and I don't care if you don't have whatever you need to manufacture a cure. Again, Mother stared at walls around her. How many times had she wandered through this place without recognizing its significance? This was NORAD, the final line of defense between the American people and the chaos of the world beyond, and she had shattered it in her hubris. Only Mother could see this crisis through. There was no one else left. Mother. What a peculiar title she'd given herself. As if she were some matriarch, arms spread wide as she coaxed the weak into hopeful belief. Hades had been wrong in his assessment of her. Mother was a charlatan in the cause she promoted. She believed in strategy, not hope. Hope was no more than a convenient tool to shepherd others. So long as they believed in her prowess, what difference did it make if that belief was based in illusion? The ends were the same, regardless of how they were reached. But where was hope here? The walls would soon be breached and a wave of killers would rush through. Hades would claim his victory, and the world would reach its end. There was no more meticulous planning to be had. Nothing short of a miracle could save them now. That's it, we're out, Leah decided. Liam, get back in that suit. He frowned. The second we open those doors, hollows will pour through this whole place. How the hell will I get by them? I don't know. We'll figure something out. The plan was foolish, but the thought had stirred something within Mother. Could it really happen? If Hades fell? If he could pursue them no further? Mother considered the result. Yes, it was possible. So long as they managed to defeat him, right here and right now, then everything would fall back into place. The future would be preserved, and mankind would outlast them all. Oh, how wrong she had been. Hope was not a means. It was the end. Mother could no longer play the fraudster. In order for them to have the slightest fraction of a chance, she would have to adopt that which she had only hid behind. She had to embrace hope for herself. Wait, Mother said. What you're considering is suicide. The moment that door opens, whomever is there will be swarmed. We don't have a choice, Leah said. Yes, you do. She met them each in the eyes. You can stay here and kill Hades. Are you insane? He's still got 30 men. We'll have a better shot against the hollows than taking him on. We can't leave the bunker, Mother emphasized. It doesn't matter whether he gets to Liam or not. Humanity will still have been defeated if Hades breaches these walls uncontested. Leah's gaze pierced deep. What are you talking about? Mother let out a deep breath. This was going to hurt, more than they could each know. There is no cure for HBRS 15.21. That's what my former self once said to the heads of the world. And she was right. The changes that curse inflicted can never be undone. Our old lives were gone the moment our minds were rewritten, and our cellular activity has been replaced entirely. Nothing can undo death, not even undeath. We've only prolonged the inevitable. There is no reversing it. Her eyes widened. But you said. I lied, Leah. Again and again and again. Enzyme infusion. DNA realignment. Those were just terms I made up to get you to do what I wanted. They're meaningless psychobabble that'd never hold up in a lab. I needed to convince you that this mission was for your own self-interest or you'd never agree. She turned to Liam. For you, as well. I don't catch your meaning, he said. There was no use holding back now. Didn't you find it odd that those notes you found kept guiding you in the same direction as us? Didn't you ever wonder why the hands of fate were so closely aligned? He opened his mouth to speak, but the words clung to the back of his throat. It was all me, Mother explained. I needed to give you that same false hope. When you left Pandemonium to go find your family, I knew that I couldn't let your journey end there, so I looked up your address through the white pages and beat you both to it. Your body might require sleep, but mine does not. In the end, I had hours to myself in your family home before you ever came close. I learned a lot about you, Liam. About your life. About your family. About your marital problems. I saw the tapestry of the man you were before and knew what you needed most. She took a step forth. I was Nellie. This whole time, with each breadcrumb you found, it was never her. It was only me. He shook his head, his cheeks reddening. I don't believe you. That was her handwriting I read. No, it was my attempted forgery supplemented by your wishful thinking. You saw what you wanted to see, just as I intended. There's talk of the government setting up a camp in Aspen, Mother recited. This one's supposed to be better than the others. I know it's far and I know it will be dangerous, but I have to do what's best for Lilith. She'll die if we stay. Please don't stop coming for us. We can't do this without you. She stepped closer still. I love you. His hands quaked as the truth became inarguable. How could you? A sob cut his thoughts off. Because Hades is wrong. Hope isn't some wall keeping us in a cell. It's the hammer we use to smash through. You would have never been able to accomplish half as much without it by your side. Even when it's based in a lie, hope still drives us to perform the impossible. We have to believe that, now more than ever. It's the only way that this can still end. What the fuck's the point? Leah asked, her eyes downcast. There's no cure. This whole thing's been a fucking waste. Mother smiled. There might be no cure, but there's still a thin sliver of hope. She turned to Liam. I wasn't lying when I said that there's a unique resource here. Only you will know what to do with it. The two watched Mother in silence. She went back to her computer and opened the administration controls. I'm going to perform a full system reset. It will go off in 10 minutes. That will force a secondary timer of 5 minutes before the lockdown ends on its own. You must defend this bunker and its contents at all costs, Liam. She looked back to Leah. That goes for you as well. Let me guess, you'll get to stay safe here while we die for you. She raised her pistol, her violet eyes ablaze. Why the fuck don't I put you down right now? Because you will have wasted a bullet. I'll be dead soon enough, with or without your intervention. She went for the door. Where the fuck do you think you're going? Leah shouted, the pistol shaking in her hands. She paused at the exit. To get reinforcements. Leah hesitated a beat, and Mother used the opening to slip outside. Nothing more needed to be said. The lights flickered with each new blast as Mother raced through the tunnels as fast as her reincarnated legs could carry. There was no time for alternatives. She could only act. How had this come to pass? Mother had only ever wanted to survive beyond death, as had her predecessor, and her predecessors before. Death was despair. Futility in the form of action. For the countless generations of mankind, they had stood in fear of death. Unmasking death's existence thus created infinite new fears, and so the only logical response had been to circumvent it entirely. And so had come the Hallowing. Humanity's best attempted cheat against this universal force. Ava had performed the impossible in her life. She had succeeded in creating what had never been more than a passing fantasy. But in pursuit of such an unattainable ambition, she had sacrificed herself, along with that of her people. Merely extending survival of the body would never broaden the horizons of life. It had only eroded their souls into hollow shells that knew nothing more than sustained animation. That was the cost of defying this natural order, and Ava had brought humanity to this end. That was why it had to be her. Mother was the hollowed version of Ava. The mirror image of the person who had come before. Only through counteracting her predecessor's hubris with her own death could the balance be restored. The southern blast door was right in front. Hollows would be the most riled here, driven out of hibernation by Hades's intervention. Just a few feet of steel reinforced with springs separated Mother from a sea of death. The moment it was opened, she would be killed. A single act of self-sacrifice, intended to end the Hallowing, once and for all. And the worst part? She didn't have the slightest idea if this would work. Hades might beat back the Hollows and defeat Leah and Liam, and drive sentience into extinction regardless. Her sacrifice would be for nothing, and humanity would still reach its end. But she had to hope. Mother had to believe in the one bit of truth that she had spent her own existence shunning. Mother thought of Evelyn. Of the girl she'd been fool enough to take as an adoptive daughter. She wondered what Evelyn would have thought, were she witnessing this act. Would she have understood why it had to be her? Or would she have begged her to stay by her side? Mother disarmed the magnetic lock with a sigh and began to spin the manual override wheel. Hollowed moans slipped through the exposed opening. Hands and legs soon followed. She exhaled and pushed harder, using every ounce of strength her body was capable of to get the door fully opened. The result was immediate. The herd poured through, hissing and moaning against this new threat. Teeth sunk into Mother's arm as she gripped the wheel, and hands scratched against her side. Within seconds, the hive mind of the hollowed classed infected detected her as a source of nutrition, and redirected their hostility her way. Mother had never been the matriarch of this new world. She had only destroyed that which came before. The product of her actions now surrounded her. Mindless. Empty. Slobbering at the mouth. Evelyn had not been hers. These were her true children. Her progeny. And like the rest of the civilization they had consumed, they wanted her next. Mother closed her eyes and embraced her fate. B1, Chapter 33, The Battle of Cheyenne Mountain. This will be my last recording. Whatever you wonder of me. Whatever you think of the person that came before. Just know this. I'm sorry. Sorry for everything. Dr. Ava Sherman. Cheyenne Mountain, Colorado. 5 months after. No cure. No cure. No cure. The words replayed in Leah's mind as she stood and stared at the empty door where Mother had been. How could they be true? That would mean that everything she had sacrificed to get to this point had been for nothing. Liam was speaking by her side, but Leah wasn't listening. No cure. No cure. She studied the equipment around her. Dead, broken, and derelict, just like everywhere else. How had Leah let herself get trapped here? It was so dark and so far from the sun, and she didn't want this place to become her tomb. She didn't want to die here. No cure. No cure. Mastermind ran back inside. He looked so small and innocent, even with a backpack brimming with firearms, and skin as shriveled as hers after so much time on the run. His smile slowly dissolved as he watched Leah standing and staring. Then Liam was inches from her face. Snap out of it, Leah. There's no cure, she said, repeating her new mantra. He sighed. I know, but we can't think of that right now. There isn't any time. But they died trusting me. Buttercup and Kurt and Vaughn. Because I believed Mother when I shouldn't have. And now it's all gone. The Lodge, Elysium, my books. Shit, how am I going to get my favorite novel back from the larder now? It's a signed copy. Do you know how hard that was to F? Liam struck her, hard and across the cheek. Leah, please just listen. The distant hollow moans rolled into their room, and Leah knew the truth. That fucking bitch. Of course Mother would abandon them in their most dire hour of need. Just kick the kin down the road and let her puppets do all the work for her. She'd never have to deal with the consequences of her lies now. Her new friends would be picking chunks of her flesh from their teeth by now, leaving the rest of them to manage this crisis alone. What do we do? Liam asked. Leah stared at the timer that Mother had started. A little more than 7 minutes remained until the first countdown hit 0. If they could just get Liam into that second bunker. If they could hold them off long enough. She buried her face in her palm and rubbed. Motherfucker. What is it? Mastermind squeaked through his damaged throat. Leah sprawled out a map of the facility. The living had built their bunker in the shape of a grid, with dozens of freestanding buildings built on the axis of the grid, some as high as 3 stories tall. An additional network of tunnels connected the 2 entrances, one to the north, and another to the south, where the ventilation system and reservoirs were located. There were 4 narrow reservoirs total, with widths matching the tunnels, and the first 3 connected at the rear. Sounds are coming from the southern entrance, Leah explained. That means hollows will start spreading due west and north. That'll put them on track with Hades and his people when they break in through the southernmost part of the base. Which means that the best place to defend against both is here. She pointed to the southeastern part of the grid. Mastermind shook his head, then dragged her finger over an inch east. Cave. In. Leah considered the obstacle, and took her sight elsewhere. With another long sigh, she tapped on the map. Oh, how fucking poetic. The reservoirs just had to be the best place to defend. If Hades and his goons get bottled in there long enough, the hollows will do the work for us. She looked at the two of them hesitating. What are you waiting for? Let's move. Leah hobbled for the door, with the two at her flank. Not a moment too soon. Gunshots and shouting had eclipsed the hollows moaning. I won't have much time. This distraction would only slow Hades down for so long. Leah turned to Liam. Not you. Your job is to find wherever Mother wanted you to go. He gawked. But I can help. You'll just die too. No. We didn't come all this way for nothing. You're getting in that second bunker, no matter what. Leah. I don't want to hear it. Head west and find where she buried this thing. I'll meet you there. She tossed him the radio. I'll call you if I need backup, okay? Liam paused in place, and Leah kept moving. It took everything out of her to keep from turning and seeing him, one last time. She wasn't sure if she'd be able to do this if he had some fucking sob face over her. What do you got, mastermind? Leah asked to distract from her thoughts. He opened his backpack of goodies. Most of the place must have been picked clean by fleeing survivors, as only a handful of pistols had been found. But a M4 carbine with a grenade under barrel proved the most promising. She snatched up the M4 and its NATO rounds, along with any .45s for her 1911, and fitted them all into her sheepskin jacket. Thanks, Leah said. Now go back and find Liam. Mastermind stared blankly, his childlike eyes blinking in confusion. Leah grunted. Don't look at me like that. I don't need your level of genius to know there's no escaping this one. I can only buy you both time. They reached the reservoirs as she finished the thought, and Leah went for her weapons. It was a bitch to load the M4 with only one working arm, and she'd be lucky if that stock didn't rip the damn thing off the moment she fired her first round, but there was no way out of it. Beggars couldn't be choosers. The hollows rounded the bend, heading for the first reservoir. An entire army had been summoned by Mother's Play, perhaps more than anyone had seen in years. The hollowing had been unleashed anew, and its acolytes were all salivating at the mouth as they scrounged for anything with the slightest bit of intelligence. They cared nothing for the struggles of life, or the drama that occurred here, or the sacrifices that had been made against them. They only wanted to spread and feast until there were no souls left. And Leah was alone against this unstoppable force. Leg shattered, arm still dead, and sheepskin jacket torn to shreds. There was no one else to face them, other than her. Mastermind suddenly tugged on her arm. What are you doing? Leah snapped. I said leave. But he only tugged harder, persistent as always. Leah shook her head. I'm only trying to slow them down, remember. He threw all his weight onto the M4. It tumbled out of her hand. Before Leah could scold him, Mastermind had already thrown the strap over his shoulder and beamed. Let's die together. Mum, he whispered. Leah smiled below her scarf. Something about hearing those words made the moment inimitable, as if it no longer mattered that there was no cure, and that she would die in this shithole. So long as they were together, perhaps it would be worth it. Perhaps death wouldn't feel so imposing. The hollows closed in. In spite of the gunfire behind, they were packed together, tighter than Leah would expect to happen naturally. She started to think like a hunter and considered how Xander would play this out. Of course they'd want an advanced guard. Leah turned to Mastermind and flashed some commands. Retreat. Cover me. Grenades only. He nodded in compliance and scurried off. Leah removed the customized suppressor from her 1911 and drew. The more hollows that showed up, the better. There was plenty of debris to use against the horde, so Leah started to shepherd them back and forth, looking for an opening. She stared each hollow in the eye, trying to find their commander. They crossed the threshold of the first reservoir as she studied each. There you are. Leah shot her target in the chest. The hunter gasped in response, releasing his pheromones and letting the hypersensitive hollows know that he was food. His neighbors swarmed the poor fucker before he realized he'd been outed. Leah danced from a few swipes and peered through the crowd. One of the hollows had ignored the frenzy when it shouldn't have, and she had her next target. Another gunshot to the chest followed by another reflexive yelp, and the second hunter was overrun. A third hunter shrieked of her own accord and flopped into the reservoir, only for a group of hollows to dive after her. The water blackened as her arms clung desperately for the surface. Leah gleamed. To lead the herd that had been summoned was the exact type of ballsy move she'd expect from Xander. Hell, it was the sort of play that she might have done in her early days, were she as ruthless as him. But he had forgotten who he was dealing with, and Leah wasn't about to get bested so easily. Mastermind launched a grenade into a cluster of hollows and gore splattered throughout. Leah used the opening to skate back to safety. The respite was brief. Though the hollow herd had been thin through all the conflicting stimulation, more were on the move, and she didn't have the leeway to tighten them back up. Leah retreated to the second reservoir, picking off any hollow before they drew too close. She swapped one magazine after another in a fruitless attempt to keep them back. More explosions rocked the ground as Mastermind fired deeper into the rear where they were still packed together. Suddenly, some of the hollows stopped shuffling and drew weapons. Leah dove behind a pile of crates as return fire came. Damn it! There were more hunters hidden in the herd than she'd first thought, and with the hollows' numbers dwindled, they had the space to make their own charge without risk. Again, Leah was forced to withdraw for more cover. Bullets flew as both sides engaged. Her dinky 1911 was firing pebbles compared to the high-caliber assault rifles her enemies had equipped. Within moments, Leah took hits to the chest and shoulder, though she could take solace in only suffering damage to an already dead arm. Help was still on her side. Mastermind eliminated 2 from the safety of the third reservoir, followed shortly by hitting another with a grenade directly. As the hunter struggled with half his torso missing, Leah leaned out of cover and finished him off. There was only one left. He ducked and dodged the surrounding hollows and rushed straight for her hiding spot. Leah spent an entire magazine to slow him down, expecting Mastermind to do the rest. The hunter barreled onward, uncontested. Where the hell are you? More gunfire flew, with still no support from Mastermind. Leah lunged behind the next group of crates and checked her jacket. Only one magazine left, and it was half full. She tossed the spent mag and quickly loaded her last, then braced her stronger knee against the crate. The timing would have to be impeccable on this one. As she heard the hunter's movements mere yards from her spot, she kicked the crate free. It slid across the floor and knocked her enemy off balance. Before he could recover, Leah launched a flurry of full metal jacketed rounds for his head. Most pattered harmlessly through his torso, but one struck home, leaving a puff of black mist out the back of his skull. The hunter collapsed. Hollows continued to close in, but the hunters had all been eliminated. At least for now. Leah scrambled to her feet and made for the third reservoir, dusting herself off along the way. Mastermind, I'm out, she shouted. Got any more .45s? She rounded the reservoir's pump and froze. Mastermind lay still, with the towering figure hunched over his head, feasting on what lay inside. At first, Leah thought his murderer was a hollow that had slipped through the cracks, but he was dripping with water from the reservoir, and she recognized that lowered neck warmer anywhere. You just killed a member of your own crew to give yourself an opening, Leah deduced. Threw her straight to the hollows and used the chance to swim all the way around. That about right, Xander. Xander grinned, his teeth like polished razors when coated with Mastermind's grey matter. Less res spent means more res gained. Tastes like this one gave me more than double what I lost with her. He drew his cutlass from beneath the hollow rags he'd camouflaged himself within. Ready to join him. Leah chucked her empty 1911 at him and made her assault. As Xander readied for defense, she drew her black steel combat knife. Contrary to what most outsiders assumed, duels between hunters were usually quite boring. When both sides were incapable of feeling pain, had infinite stamina, and were fighting without guns, the winner was almost always the bigger hunter. Hits that didn't kill instantly were meaningless against a larger foe, as they were guaranteed to retaliate against any damage sustained with greater force. Only during a quick bout could the weaker hunter hope to prevail. The longer the fight wore on, the more exponentially fucked they became. As Leah launched through pipes that lined the fourth reservoir and felt something hard snap into something soft, the result of this one became obvious. She was getting her ass handed to her. Xander twirled the cutlass in hand. What's wrong? Not so tough when you're on your own, hey. She coughed up blood. Go fuck yourself. Another torrent of swings came her way, and again Leah deflected one too few. Ichor burst free as she took a slash across the chest. For all the shit that she could give Xander, he was a capable fighter. His attacks were precise and aimed consistently around her dead arm, where she was most vulnerable. Any counter she levied fell pitifully against the wall he'd built against her surviving hand, not even bothering to defend the other side. He's taking his time, she realized. He could end this whenever he wanted. Leah caught sight of a small boat sitting inside the reservoir, no doubt tossed up by its previous inhabitants in a vain attempt to escape their fates. If only she could reach it, she might gain herself some semblance of safety. But the moment she crawled its way, Xander knocked her back to the center of the tunnel. It's always the same with you, hey. He kicked her in the side, eyes burning crimson. You think that the rest of us should look up to you like a god just because you hunted first. Like you're the reason that we all have a res. He kicked. All this time, and you're just a self-centered cunt. Another kick. Is that why you did it? Is that why you murdered Spike in cold blood? Kick. Hunter's honor until it's convenient. Until we get in your way. He tipped her upright and pointed his cutlass. Go on and say it. Tell me how much better you think you are. Might as well be honest in your last miserable moment. If I can just get an opening. Leah stared him in the eye and sneered. Yeah, you got me, Xander. Always thought the rest of you were bringing me down. And you know what? I was right. Look at you. Dressed in rags, buried in this hole, smelling like a waterlogged corpse. You're more disgusting than a hollow. Think eating me will make you the best? All it'll prove is that you're a little bitch who could only beat me when I'm crippled. Go on and do it. My res inside you might be the only thing that's ever made you special. Xander grit his teeth, eyes bulging the more Leah spoke. When her rant reached its end, he howled and raised his cutlass for the killing blow. Leah surged into a spin. This attack didn't come from her surviving hand. She had shifted all her weight into her shoulder and let her dead arm swing free like an improvised whip. Xander's cutlass merely scraped her side as he was smacked in the face, and Leah twisted into the finale, planting her knife into his now exposed neck. Steel parted through bone, and his spinal column was pierced. Xander gasped, his body seizing from the shock. Leah wrenched her knife free and studied the terror-stricken eyes of her enemy. And for the record, the reason I hate you has nothing to do with your skills as a hunter, and everything to do with how much of an asshole you are. She stabbed Xander through the base of the jaw. His eyes saw no more. With a kick, his dead body flopped back into the boat. Hisses rose anew. Leah glanced over her shoulder and saw a wall of hollows just feet away. She slipped onto the boat herself, and not a moment too soon. Her attackers plunged into the water as her boat drifted deeper into the safety of the reservoir. Leah blinked through the blurs of re-hollowing and examined her dead shipmate. She shrugged, then dug her knife into Xander's scalp. Less res spent means more res gained. Leah had survived. Again. But at what cost? She felt no satisfaction with this one. The battle might have been over, but another was about to begin. The waves of hollows continued their slow, laborious march onward, and there was nothing she could do to stop them. One of the hollows suddenly caught her eye. Skin shriveled, noseless, and with a black cowboy hat above, it shuffled silently among the others. As Leah watched powerlessly from the boat, she swore that it turned her way and winked. Then there was only darkness as the bunker's power reset. B1, Chapter 34, God of Death. The Father's capacity for intelligence is unimaginable. We have given him various Greek mythologies to test his retention, and he was able to recite each to perfection. Only when deprived of nutrition does his cognition decline. Sounds like the perfect weapon to me. Just gotta make sure he's on our side. Of course, General. That is the goal now. Dr. Ava Sherman. Cheyenne Mountain, Colorado, 4 months after. 5 minutes left. That's all Liam had to survive. It was strange to be at this point. A little more than a week before, Liam had only involved himself in this mission in the hopes of reuniting with his lost family. He had put everything on the line, and staved off the sheer oppressive weight of his task, all because he truly believed in the vision he'd foreseen. A zealot to his own personal religion. Liam had told himself that if this didn't work out, he'd end it himself. Put a bullet in his brain and hope that he'd see Nellie and Lilith in the afterlife. With them both gone, there hardly seemed any point to continue. And yet, here he still was. Miles under a mountain, picking off undead monsters as they shuffled his way, his sole companion the knowledge that he'd been manipulated to reach this point. The lies no longer seemed to matter, only that he succeeded in giving them purpose. Was this still survival, or had Liam adopted something else? Had he slipped out of the prison himself and finally seen the fleeting gift that lay beyond? The radio word. Liam, it's Leah. Thank God. He grabbed the radio. Are you all right? Some hollows have reached my position. Yes, for now. I'm sorry, Liam, but I've been cut off. Where's Mastermind? She paused. It's just me. The radio shook in his hand. Not him too. Liam was starting to think that Mastermind would be the only one to see this day through. We've got a bigger problem, Leah said. I've managed to thin out as many hunters as I could, but I saw something in the herd and I don't know. I think Hades is coming for you himself. Be careful, Liam. He's still out there. Liam swallowed the lump in his throat and surveyed his environment once again. The government had built this fortress like an underground city, with over a dozen windowless buildings constructed on giant, metal springs to keep from touching the granite walls of the mountain. Perhaps that strategy had been sound when they assumed that a nuclear attack was their greatest threat, but when the enemy was an infinite wave of reincarnated corpses, the empty gaps became their adversary, and it was no surprise this place became overrun so quickly. Hollows could simply squeeze around where they couldn't enter, and with Liam taking his stand at an intersection on the westernmost part of the tunnel's grid, his attackers were coming from every direction. There was no way out of it. The secondary bunker had been built behind the missile warning center, bored straight into the walls of the mountain. Moans rolled out, and Liam drew his flashlight. He blinked through the dim gloom of the bunker, but could make next to nothing out from the approaching hollows. They all looked so similar. There you are. Liam fired his Remington. The .308 round tore through what he thought was Hades' skull, but the hollow fell with a groan, and Liam realized that he had been a she. Another caught his attention, and again he fired, but he noticed the whites of its eyes before it dropped. Another grinned as it drew near, and Liam brought this new Hades down, only to realize that he had miscalculated. Everywhere he turned, he saw the same shriveled corpses coming for him. All withered. All unrecognizable as human. All identical to his real executioner. Liam cried out against the futility of it all and retreated into the missile warning center. It was a single-story building with only a handful of compartments. Liam retreated to the final room, where the original monitoring room had once been. The desks and computers had been piled outside as a makeshift barricade, giving Liam just enough room to take shots from the safety of the door. It was the best place to defend. Attackers could only come in from the front. The rearward bridge into the secondary bunker had been covered with steel netting. The hollow slammed through the entrance, and Liam engaged. With each shot through the head, he mechanically yanked his bolt action back and aimed for another. He had to make every shot count. There was precious little ammunition to hold them off. A digital timer glowed above the bunker's retractable steel door, pushing mercilessly down by the second. 2.5 minutes remained before the lockdown ended, and the door could be open. All Liam had to do was defend himself until then. If he could only make it inside that bunker and lock the entrance behind, the hollows would turn their aggression away from him. He had to believe that. He had to believe there was still a chance for them to make it. The vent to the roof flew open, and a figure in black dropped through. A halo of dust furled out where he landed, and before Liam could turn his own weapon, a revolver was pointed straight at his head. Hades tipped his cowboy hat and gleamed. The bastard had outflanked him. So quickly, so easily. Liam had been thwarted. Hades took a step forth in enthusiastic silence, gun locking Liam in place. But then he glanced over his shoulder and froze. Something else had caught his attention. The timer. He studied Liam, still bewildered where he stood, then looked back to the digital timer above a mysterious door, ominously counting down, and then back to Liam. The revolver jittered in his hand. Well, I can't just, he once again examined the room he'd fallen into, his eyes suddenly panicked as he looked from side to side. Fuck it. Hades shouted before tossing the revolver aside and breaking into a charge. The Remington got knocked to the ground as Hades piled into Liam. Stabs rocked his chest as his attacker's fists delivered spiked blows. Liam threw his own weight in, and knocked Hades back. The two wrestled against one another as the hollows tore into the barricade out front. Liam had never been much of a fighter, at least in this sense. He didn't spend enough time in civilization to engage in the act, and martial arts was not exactly at the forefront of survivalist training. Predators were better left avoided in the wild than faced directly, and guns were the great equalizer for any confrontation. So going against an undead mass murderer was somewhat of an uphill battle. Every hit that Liam managed to land was absorbed harmlessly into his enemy's eternal frame, and each riposte Hades dealt shredded through his flesh. Within moments of fighting, Liam's body was on fire from a dozen open wounds. The hollows howled in a frenzy, and shoved harder against the makeshift barricade. Some started to squeeze through a breach. Oh no you don't. Hades shouted at the hollows before breaking from their melee and drawing his bolo machete. Heads started to roll wherever he swung his weapon. Liam lunged for the Remington and wrenched another cartridge into the chamber, but before he could land a clear shot, Hades was back on the offensive. Blackened ichor burst from his shoulder where he took the bullet, and he was again on Liam. More hollows slipped through the opening as the two went against one another. Liam let Hades remain interposed between himself and the hollows, using the hardwood stock of his rifle to bludgeon his opponent in place. Hades found himself at a sudden disadvantage, now forced to fend off attackers from both sides. But the handicap was short-lived, as he quickly impaled a hollow with his machete and anchored both into the breach of the barricade, cutting off reinforcements. With a grin, Hades rushed back to Liam. Punches fell again like rain in a monsoon, and Liam floundered against the assault. This was hopeless. No victory could be had against this unrelenting force. Hades moved with the steady and meticulous grace of death itself, delivering blow after blow into his opponent's weaker, mortal shell. Liam's vision began to blur. The walls were closing in, and he saw only the faintest glow at the end of this tunnel. If only Leah could be here. Liam didn't want to die alone in this dark place. A thought suddenly entered his mind. Just don't shine a light in our faces, she had once said. His fingers gripped feebly for the flashlight at his waist. Could it really work again? Hades towered above, his red, infernal eyes burning like brimstone. His barbed gloves were slick with Liam's blood, and the shadows became trapped in his wrinkled face as he gleamed. He raised his fists, readying to finish what he'd started. Liam rolled over and aimed the flashlight. A beam of pure radiance struck Hades head-on, and his demonic pupils curled into microscopic beads. He gaped into the light, his awareness completely lost. This was the opening Liam needed. He scooped up his Remington by the barrel and swung, forcing every ounce of strength he had left into the attack. It would be strong enough for the hardwood stock to reach Hades's head. Strong enough to crack the soft bone of his Reitzer skull. Strong enough to end this nightmare, once and for all. Hades deflected the blow with ease. Before Liam could consider what went wrong, a knee struck him in the groin, and he was back on the ground. His mouth filled with blood as he bit down on his tongue. All right, fun's over, Hades said, blinking through a blinded haze. Gotta say, not a bad final move, but you already did the light trick back in Reno. You know what they say. Fool me once, shame of you. Fool me twice, I kinda had it coming. Liam sobbed through the pain. He'd been so close. Hades frowned. Hey now, don't look like that. You put up a pretty good fight. Way better than I was expecting. I haven't had a thrill like that in years. I mean, come on, Liam. We just duked it out at the bottom of the motherfucking world, surrounded by a mob of hollows the likes of which no one's ever seen. He raised his fists in the air. Fucking awesome. Are you really telling me that you didn't feel something magical in the air, especially with that fucking doomsday clock in the background? He squinted behind. Speaking of. Liam gazed at the bunker door, and his heart sank. The timer had reached 0. They could enter. Hades cackled. Looks like I'm the last man standing on this one, though our other friends want a piece of the action too. The hollows had gone berserk with all the spilled blood, and the makeshift barricade was moaning against all the added weight. Wood cracked into plastic, and the barricade caved an inch. Hades grabbed Liam by the collar and yanked him to his feet. So it looks like this is where it ends for us. Here's what I'm gonna do though. I'll let the hungry ones get a couple chomps in for being good sports, and then you and I will check out this secret room for ourselves. I don't know about you, but I'm just dying to see what Mother's put in there. The barricade finally snapped, and the hollows poured through. Hades beamed. Oh, and if you're thinking that they're taking us both down, don't worry about me. I've been in much tighter spots than here. He nodded at the endless horde of hollows closing in. Yeah, I'm definitely getting out of this one. Still got a burger to make for myself, after all. He spun Liam around and dangled his limp form against their attackers. Any last words before there's no going back? I promise I'll make it quicker if they're cool enough. Liam could hardly breathe with all the blood gushing from his tongue, and the hollows were swiftly closing in. A few more seconds, and it was over. Hades raised his brow. Didn't catch that, Liam. He leaned in. Go on, spit it out. Poor choice of words, mate. Liam vomited out a mouthful of blood, splattering Hades in the face. The hollows hissed and turned their attention to him. Hades gawked as the bastards lunged past Liam and went straight for him. Uh-oh. Liam used what remained of his strength to wrench himself free. He plummeted to the floor, out of reach of all else. Moans and grunts grew as the hollows piled into Hades. Quickly and quietly, Liam scurried under the crowd and went for the bunker door. Ichor splashed free as Hades fought his new enemies. Liam sprung to his feet the moment he was clear. With a yank against the latch, the door slid open. He stared through a tiny, transparent portal and watched the carnage unfold behind. The hollows were dropping left and right to Hades' cutting blows, but for every one he killed, 2 more were there to replace. Even he was powerless against such immeasurable strength. Hades did not go down quickly. Every step of the way, every bite into his body, he spouted another crude insult at his enemies, shit-talking and killing all in sight. The hollows continued without mercy as he spouted a bottomless deluge of profanity-laced attacks. Then one took a chunk out of his head, and Hades was no more. B1, Chapter 35, Unique Resource. There's still a chance to live through this thing, right? Not us, no. But perhaps our children, or our children's children. They may see the end of this pandemic if humanity can survive for that long. Dr. Ava Sherman. Cheyenne Mountain, Colorado, 2 months after. Just a little further now. Liam scanned the tunnel of the secondary bunker. The walls were made of rough granite, and a series of fluorescent bulbs had been strung along its sides. Off in the distance, another door had been constructed, this one with a scanner nearby. Liam took out his radio. Leah, it's me. Are you still there? Yes, she said, now exhausted. He started to move. Hades is dead and I've gotten inside the door. It appears to be some kind of airlock. Say AG, she sputtered. You're BR up. Liam took a few steps back, and her static cleared. He grunted. Ugh. There must be some kind of interference with the granite, I'll lose you if I go any deeper. Figures. Any chance you can get to me? Afraid not. I'm stuck until the hollows go back to sleep. The radio's battery beeped, and Liam realized how little time they had left. So this is it, then. He hardly believed the words himself. This is it, Leah said. Don't think you'll be hearing from me again. Liam shook his head. What a sordid affair this was. I don't know what to say. Thanks for saving my life, Leah, would be a start. He chuckled. You still owe me a shower. You know that, right? Oh yeah? Well, you still owe me a cure, so I guess we're even. Liam didn't need to see her face to hear the bitterness beneath her sarcasm, even if she couldn't notice it from herself. He could almost picture her out there, stuck in some hole in the wall, miserable and alone. Do me a favor, Liam ordered. Whatever happens to me, however this ends, I need you to do something for me. She paused. What is it? I want you to live. Piss off. I mean it, Leah. If I've learned anything from our time together, it's that being alive is more than just having a working heart. It's embracing each moment for what it is. Not like Hades and his nihilism, but for the purpose that we can each find for ourselves. That's what separates those who live from those who only survive. The meaning that we give ourselves. Take it from me. I was a millionaire before all this. I got to travel the world and had more fame than I knew what to do with, but I never truly let myself live. I'd simply chased after small pleasures while ignoring the deeper meaning behind it all. I don't think I ever mentioned this before, but Nellie was going to divorce me, Leah. That was our final conversation together, and that was what had driven me here. I wanted to repair the damage I'd created to my own life, even after it was far too late. He leaned into the radio. And in a certain sense, that's okay too. Because I see now that even in losing my future with her, I never lost the time we had together. Life isn't a zero-sum game of how long you survive, and there are no permanent choices. All we can ever do is try our best. He laughed. It took this nightmare for me to see that. I might have lost my family, but I gained another. I got to see the world one last time, and I got to understand life in a way that I'd shunned before. He paused. And it's all thanks to you. You're beautiful, Leah. And I don't mean that in some cringy, necrophiliac way. I mean inside. You've struggled so long and so hard to survive in this world too, and you've forgotten the very reason for why you did it. It was to feel that same meaning inside. He sighed. So do me this favor, and remember that when you get the hell out of here, yeah. You fucking asshole, she said with a grunt. Really? You're going to lay down that heavy shit now? Liam shrugged. Can't exactly do it in person, love. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Liam watched the radio and tried to imagine what she looked like on the other side. Just don't forget me, okay? Leah said at last. Her voice was so soft, so feminine, and so vulnerable, in a way he'd never heard before. I don't want my story to end with me. I won't, Liam promised. From this day until my last, I'll never forget what you've done. She sobbed. Goodbye, Liam. He blinked through his own tears. Goodbye, Leah. Liam put down the radio, and watched the light fade out. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Liam limped to the next door, his mind adrift in an ocean of raw emotion. As he drew near, a speaker activated. Warning, Mother's electronic voice announced. Intruder, detected. Infected biomatter, detected. Defenses, activating. A visor slid out above the door, exposing a pair of turrets. Red beams locked onto his head as their barrels took aim. Oh, shit. Leave it to Mother to not tell him about some fucking automated turrets. You have 10 seconds to confirm uninfected status. 10. 9. What the hell was he supposed to do? Sing the bloody anthem? 7. 6. 5. Liam spotted the eye scanner station again and made a lunge for it. The light twinkled against his brown eyes. 3. It paused. Uninfected status, confirmed. Defenses, deactivating. The visor retracted and the next door unlatched. Liam let out a sigh of relief. If there was another door after this, he was definitely turning around. Liam stepped inside, and the moment became surreal. Where the rest of the cavern was dimly lit and deteriorated after years of neglect, this part of the bunker looked like a luxury hotel. The concrete floor was carpeted, and the walls had been lined with faux pine. There were plants scattered throughout, with bright, luminous bulbs shining more light than the sun. There was even a fireplace with an LCD screen playing video of an active fire as a replacement for the real version. Freeze, someone ordered. Liam instinctively threw his hands in the air and stared. The figure hid beneath a matching hazmat suit and armed itself with an assault rifle. Its face was obscured behind an opaque visor, and its shape was androgynous against all the plastic layers. Are you Liam? The figure asked, its voice distorted. Yes, he said. It lowered its rifle. So you're the one who will save the world with me. The figure removed its helmet, and Liam gasped. There's a unique resource here, Mother had said. Black hair fell over tanned skin. Only you will know what to do with it. Lips pursed free as fresh air was breathed in. The past might be gone, but the future can still be saved. The eyes caught his attention most. They were brown and without the slightest trace of red. She was a woman. Living, breathing, and free of the Hallowing's curse. Just like him. Hello, Liam, she said with a smile. My name's Evelyn. B1, epilogue. As we gaze upon the ruins of that which came before, I want to remind you all that this is not the end, but rather a new beginning. Fear not the Hallowing, for it is merely an element in this new world, and not its definition. Mother. The sticks, pandemonium. 2 years after. Leah parked the truck just at the edge of sight. The sun made its final descent and gleamed off distant waves. It'd been some time since she had visited the ocean, and she couldn't help but feel how small and unimposing it was when weighed against the greater world beyond. The mountains, the trees, the sky. Was the sea truly so vast in comparison? Leah clasped the bellflower she'd plucked from the hills with her now rejuvenated arm. It reminded her of the one Liam gave her, back when her own soul was on the cusp of disintegration. A tear fell free as she considered what had been lost, but he'd been right in his lesson. So long as she continued to find meaning in all that this world had to offer, she would never truly be dead. Leah thought of where she would go next. Perhaps she could return to Pandemonium. With both Mother and Hades gone, their whole society would collapse without the right guidance. Or maybe she could utilize her skills to discover what had happened to Liam's family. Most might consider such a challenge to be a foregone conclusion, but Leah had her skills, and it would be nice to use them for someone other than herself. Or perhaps she could just pick a direction at random and keep driving. The world was large, and there was so much of it that she'd never seen before. But then again, maybe her choice didn't matter. Maybe all she needed to care about was claiming the ephemeral bliss that could be gained with each day. Leah breathed deep. Whatever happened next, whatever uncertainty came her way, she'd savor what time she'd been given. And live her life to its fullest. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Hurry up, Liam. Evelyn ordered. He scooped up the medical instructions. Right, love. Sorry. The fluorescent lighting flickered, once again reminding Liam that he'd have to go back topside and fix the connection to the solar grid. How the hell had Mother kept up with all this damned maintenance? Liam shook his head. There were more important matters at play than a couple loose wires. He sprinted down the hall and into their medical lab. Evelyn smiled as he entered. To think that they had once been a couple strangers locked in a bunker by a mad scientist of a Reitzer, but that was more than 2 years ago now, and Liam could hardly see his life without her. They had been through so much together, and the culmination of their relationship had been building until this moment. We're fine, Liam, Evelyn said. You don't have to keep reading it. He shrugged. I know. I just want to be careful. Mother's protocols are thorough, and you have to have sterilized this place 1,000 times. You never know what can go wrong, especially these days. I'm not exactly a doctor. She winked. I am. He laughed. Here we go again, lording over me with your fake degree. I'll have you know that I once drank water from elephant dung. I bet Mother never made you do that. Evelyn started to chuckle, but cringed halfway through. Crap, it's coming. Liam froze. Already? Are you sure? She gasped. Of course I'm sure. Liam went straight to work. Prepping the towels, bringing fresh water, attending to every need that came her way, and apologizing for every slight he delivered to Evelyn, both real and imagined. Hours went by as the process wore on, and Liam did everything possible to aid in nature's process. And then just like that, Evelyn's cries were eclipsed by another. The head popped free, and Liam quickly sliced open the umbilical cord. It was a strange ordeal being here in this way. With Lilith's birth, Liam had been more a spectator than participant, as the attending physicians were better qualified than him, and their presence somehow diluted the magic of the event. But as Liam stared into the eyes of his second child, a sense of euphoria flowed through him that he hadn't felt before. This was a new soul, experiencing the world in its first moments, and he was there to help facilitate the event. Boy or girl? Evelyn asked, exhausted. Liam bobbed the baby from one shoulder to the other and checked its business along the way. Girl. She leaned back and grinned. I guess you know what that means. He did. This was the first child of a new world. A survivor of the civilization that had fallen before. Life would persevere through her own, and everyone would forever remember her story. She deserved to be named with the honor and privilege that came with the title. Liam held his daughter close. Welcome to life, Leah.